I'm investigating the unsolved murders of women who have gone missing over the past 40 years.
The sheer scale, truly shocking.
It's led me to Peter Tobin and Angus Sinclair. Both of these men were able to kill without being caught for decades, and I suspect they could be responsible for many more murders. I'm Mark Williams-Thomas, and throughout my career as an investigator, I've exposed some of the UK's most infamous crimes.
I've never investigated something so complicated as this.
I started my investigation looking at Peter Tobin's teenage A.
I just want to know where she is.
Louise Kay could be buried in that garden.
But then my case opened up into something far more sinister. Three infamous murders in 1977 that have remained unsolved to this day. And a new prime suspect, serial killer, Angus Sinclair.
Years after the World's End murders, the conviction of a man who's been called Scotland's secret serial killer.
But as the net closes in,
could Sinclair have done this on his own?
is there evidence that Angus Sinclair did not kill alone?
This unlocks it all.
Who else could he have murdered?
I don't know why this man has never been charged with everything that he has ever done.
Will the victims' families finally get justice? As I investigate whether these crimes could make Angus Sinclair one of the country's most prolific serial killers. I'm investigating one of the most notorious unsolved crimes in Britain. 3 women murdered in Glasgow in 1977 within months of each other.
It was everybody's worst nightmare. You know, their daughter's going out on the town and then never returning home.
The first victim in August was Anna Kenny. She was abducted after a night out with friends. 2 months later, mother of 2, Hilda McAuley, disappeared.
Hiya. Can I get my coat, please?
The final victim, Agnes Cooney, a children's nurse, was last seen alive in December, hitchhiking home. All the victims were found strangled, gagged with items of their own clothing, and their bodies left in remote locations. I've found compelling evidence that appears to tie Angus Sinclair to all of these murders. He would trawl the city at night, offering women lifts.
I'm actually just 10 minutes down the road.
I tell you what, jump in, I'll get you a lift.
I've spoken to eyewitnesses who can place him or his distinctive caravanette near the crime scenes.
That's the vehicle. I can be sure of that.
And you've got a good look at him?
Yeah, that's him.
But to this day, Angus Sinclair has never been charged with the Glasgow 3 murders.
On the advice of my solicitor, I've absolutely nothing further to say.
Though he remains the police's prime suspect.
In 2004, the police set up Operation Trinity, which was to try and find out if the Glasgow murders in 1977 could have been committed by Angus Sinclair. But what they discovered threatens to take my investigation in a whole new direction.
I'm meeting Eddie McCusker, who helped lead Operation Trinity.
Operation Trinity set out to establish what?
It was hugely important to link Angus Sinclair with the other murders. Clearly we were dealing with a very dangerous individual, and it was recognised that he may have been responsible for other crimes.
His team of detectives analysed 1,138 female homicides over 36 years. They found only 6 murders uniquely similar in the way the victims had been bound, gagged and left. Edinburgh murders of Helen Scott and Christine Eady, the Glasgow 3 murders, and the shocking discovery of another victim.
It became very clear in the early stages of the investigation that there was one other murder which occurred only weeks before the disappearance of Anna Kenny, who was the first victim.
And that other murder was?
That was the murder of Frances Barker. Frances's murder demonstrated the same features in terms of strangulation, gagging and binding as occurred with the other victims.
Frances Barker was 37 years old and worked as a baker. On the 10th of June, just before the Glasgow killing spree began, Frances went out for an evening with her sister and friends. In the early hours she arrived home, but she was seen alive again. I'm meeting Angela, her sister-in-law, to get a better understanding of Frances and what happened that night.
She was the youngest of the family. She loved her work. She was a lovely girl.
Tell me about the night Frances went out.
She went out with Bridget, her sister, and sat and had a few drinks. When Frances left, she took the wrong route. She took her sister's. Got home, no keys. She couldn't get into her flat, and she was never seen again.
The next day, Frances never turned up for work and was missing for over 2 weeks before her family and friends received the news they'd been dreading.
My husband phoned me and told me that they had found a body and they thought it was Frances, and unfortunately it was. Everybody was devastated.
Frances was discovered by a farm labourer in Glenboy, on the outskirts of Glasgow, 14 miles from her home. I want to know what might have happened to Frances after she was locked out of her house.
So she can't get into her own house, and therefore her intention would have been to get back to her sister's.
And park kids.
So whoever picked up Frances Barker would have been a taxi or someone offering a lift.
Posing as a taxi driver.
There's evidence Angus Sinclair would pick up low off the streets of Glasgow. So could Frances Barker be another one of Sinclair's victims? Eddie McCusker has to take me to the site where her body was found.
So Eddie, this is a very public location. Although it may not be that regularly visited, it is in the open. Was there any attempt to hide Frances's body?
Frances was placed on the ground here just off this track, and when she was recovered, she was naked from the waist down. She was lying out on her back right there. She died by strangulation, compression of the throat. Her hands had been tied together and she was gagged. Articles of her own clothing were used.
When you look at the other murders, would you say that it was the same killer?
The similarities are striking. The nature of the death that Frances faced, I am quite certain that where we are standing right now is ground that Angus Sinclair walked on.
Frances Barker's murder bears all the hallmarks of Angus Sinclair. However, the police were faced with a real dilemma.
There was someone convicted of the murder of Frances Barker, Thomas Ross Young.
A week after Frances was found, the police arrested Thomas Ross Young, a lorry driver and known sex offender.
Thomas Ross Young had been committing a number of violent rapes over a fair period of time. He was regarded as a particularly dangerous individual.
With Thomas Ross Young behind bars, the case was closed. But the killings did not stop. Over the following 6 months, the other victims I'd been investigating in Glasgow and Edinburgh were all murdered in the same unique way as Francis Barker.
The whole problem of this sits around one case, and that is the murder of Francis Barker. There was a man convicted of her murder, Thomas Ross Young, yet you have these other 5 murders. What does that say?
Did Thomas Ross Young abduct and kill Francis Barker in June 1977? Or is it possible the police got the wrong man?
I examined the evidence which convicted Thomas Ross Young.
Do you think Thomas Ross Young's conviction is sound?
No, I do not.
My investigation into serial killer Angus Sinclair has led me to a potential 6th victim. 37-year-old Francis Barker was found strangled and dumped on the outskirts of Glasgow in June 1977. But this case had seemingly been solved. Thomas Ross Young was found guilty of her murder and sentenced to life imprisonment.
I've established a 6th murder, which bears all the hallmarks of the 3 murdered in Glasgow and the World's End killings. But Thomas Ross Young was convicted of the murder of Francis Barker, so I now need to look further into that conviction.
Thomas Ross Young was a very violent and regular offender, and in fact was sentenced for a series of attacks on prostitutes. Whatever role he played in the murder of Francis Barker, he wasn't an innocent man.
Thomas Ross Young would regularly pick up prostitutes and take them to secluded areas around Glasgow. Just a few weeks before Francis Barker's murder, he brutally assaulted a prostitute in Glenboig, the same area where Francis Barker's body was later discovered.
The significance of that was it was quite close to the spot where the body of Francis Barker had been found. And so Thomas Ross Young was immediately in the frame for the Francis Barker murder.
I want to know more about what evidence the police used to prosecute Thomas Ross Young. Joe Jackson is the retired Detective Chief Superintendent who led the team that arrested Young.
We entered the house. There was one area that he was in, kind of basement. He was hiding down there.
So is this under the floorboards?
Yeah, out of the floorboards, the sky popped up. The 2 cops got fright of the life.
You searched the area, and what do you find?
A compact and 3 buns.
Right.
In the trial, the prosecution argued that the compact and 3 buttons found in Young's home belonged to Francis Barker. There was lots of other evidence, even an admission from Young that he might have killed her. The jury took less than an hour to convict him of murder, but Young appealed the conviction. I'm meeting solicitor John McLeod, who handled his appeal.
The evidence that was presented to convict Thomas Ross Young at court, would you agree that was compelling?
It's not a term I would use. Plainly it was adequate because he was convicted. But his position is that those items were planted.
Planted by whom?
Well, he would have said, had he been answering these questions, that they were done by the police.
Did he have any evidence to support that?
No.
There have been since individuals who have said the evidence in relation to Thomas Ross Young doesn't stand up. There was evidence that was planted. What would you say to that?
I'd say it's rubbish. It was a straightforward case. He was convicted by a jury. From my side of it, it was done absolutely straight.
I can't talk to Thomas Ross Young. He died behind bars in 2014. His appeal was rejected on all the evidence against him, and I believe the original investigation stands up to scrutiny. I can't find any evidence that this is a miscarriage of justice, so is there another explanation as to why Francis Barker's murder bears all the hallmarks of Angus Sinclair? Could Thomas Ross Young and Angus Sinclair be connected in some way?
One person who could help me is Sarah, Angus Sinclair's ex-wife, who was with him for over 10 years. She's asked for her identity to be disguised.
Did Angus ever mention to you someone called Thomas Ross Young?
No.
You've never heard that name?
No, not ever.
Did Angus Sinclair know the area of Glenboig where Francis Barker's body was dumped?
Very well. He was always there. He was out there frequently in Glenboig.
Sarah can link Angus Sinclair to Glenboig, just a mile away from where Francis Barker's body was found. So I've gone to investigate further. This is where Thomas Ross Young attacked a prostitute a few weeks before the murder.
I've been in Glenboig this afternoon. I wanted to try and speak to people who can put Angus Sinclair in this area in 1977. I've spoken to two people who used to go drinking with him at a local pub. Thank you. I've spoken to a guy who actually knew him when he used to park his caravanette in this scrapyard. Around the time when he was using that caravanette to carry out the murders.
Sinclair bought his caravanette just 11 days after Francis was murdered. And the scrapyard is only 1 mile away from the crime scene.
I can now put Angus Sinclair definitively in Glenboig within a matter of a mile of where Francis Barker's body was disposed.
Now I need to find out where Sinclair was around the time Francis Barker was abducted from her home.
Did you know that during June 1977 that Angus was driving around Glasgow trying to pick young women up off the street?
No. No. I think I was living a different life for him.
I'm getting a bit sick of this. You don't trust me, do you? Of course. That's the problem with people. Nobody trusts me.
It became quite apparent that he was womanising, really. And I would just go mad.
Why? Where were you? Tell me where you were.
Sarah tells me that after fighting, Angus Sinclair would sometimes stay at his mother's house in West Glasgow. She lived on Mary Hill Road, remarkably the same road where Francis Barker lived, only a few hundred yards away. On the night Francis was abducted, Sarah tells me Sinclair had been kicked out and was not living at home.
On the night that Francis Barker went missing, she was dropped off at 289 Mary Hill Road, and Angus Sinclair was living at around the time at 375 Mary Hill Road. He'd fallen out with his wife, but maybe he was a 2-minute walk away from where Francis Barker was dropped off.
I can now place Sinclair in the area Francis was last seen, and in Glenboig where her body was found. But how do I explain Thomas Ross Young's involvement?
There had to be a connection First of all, we wondered whether Thomas Ross Young was somehow working with Angus Sinclair. We could find absolutely no evidence that they were associated in any way.
I need to build up a picture of Sinclair's known associates, who may be able to assist me with my investigation. I'm looking for any evidence Angus Sinclair committed crimes with other people. In the late 1970s, Sinclair teamed up with a man called Eddie Cotogno.
Beautiful.
He was a local pornographer, and Sinclair would help find young women to be amateur models.
Eddie Cotogno was quite a significant associate of Sinclair. Sinclair had developed an interest in photography, photographing women and sexual poses, etc.
Angus Sinclair persuaded Eddie Cotogno to show him how to develop black and white photographs. Angus Sinclair would do this at his mother's home in Maryhill, Glasgow, the same area where Francis Barker used to live.
That's it. Beautiful.
Eddie Cotogno is an important witness. I'd like to talk to him to find out if he ever saw Sinclair with Thomas Ross Young, but unfortunately, that's not possible.
Cotogno was found in his loft, bludgeoned. The level of violence used towards him is symptomatic and very indicative of what Sinclair would do. It would be a coincidence of astronomical proportions that he wasn't involved.
Eddie Cotogno's murder in 1979 remains unsolved. Could he be another one of Angus Sinclair's victims?
Angus said to me, the police may come interview me as regards a man named Mr. Cotogno, because I knew him. He said, if they ask where I was here with you.
So Angus asks you to lie, give an alibi for him?
Yes.
Items of jewellery were stolen from Cotogno, and Sarah remembers talk of her husband bringing jewellery into the house around this time.
I questioned, gosh, what's this jewellery? Did you have anything to do with this? And he denied it.
Who do you think killed him?
I think Angus did. Definitely.
I'm investigating Angus Sinclair's possible involvement in the murder of Francis Barker. Her killing bears all the unique hallmarks of the 5 other victims in 1977. Abducted at the weekend, bound and gagged with items of their own clothing, and left in the open to be found. Although Thomas Ross Young, a serial rapist, was convicted for this crime, I believe Sinclair is also linked to her murder.
Could Thomas Ross Young and Angus Sinclair both be connected in some way to the murder of Francis Barker? One theory I have is that Thomas Ross Young and Angus Sinclair worked together as co-offenders.
Retired Assistant Chief Constable Derek Robertson was part of the team that looked for a connection between Sinclair and Young.
Could you link Thomas Ross Young with Angus Sinclair?
They lived in the same area. They frequented Glasgow, same areas of Glasgow at that time. But physically, putting the two of them together, could they have known each other? Potentially. Could they have been out together? Potentially. Was there any evidence coming back to say that? No, I don't believe there was.
The Court of Appeal examined the case and found no evidence of a link between Sinclair and Francis Barker's murder. But I want to take a closer look at the police interviews when the two men were questioned about each other.
What can you tell me about Sinclair?
I honestly wouldn't tell you anything if I knew that chap.
And during interview, Thomas Ross Young says he doesn't know Angus Sinclair, but even if I did, I wouldn't tell you.
Could you state your full name, please?
Angus Robertson Sinclair.
Your answers will be tape recorded and may be noted and may be used in evidence. Do you understand that?
I do.
Angus Sinclair is asked, what do you know about Thomas Ross Young? His answer, nothing. He has not denied knowing Thomas Ross Young. No reply. Could easily have said no and got himself out of that. He didn't.
I've turned to the confidential police files to dig deeper into Sinclair's criminal past. I'm looking for evidence he committed crimes with others. One case from 1976 could help. Just a year before the Glasgow killings began.
Who is it?
I went along to answer the door. Two men appeared in front of me with stockings over their head. One had a hammer, another was brandishing a knife, and I was pushed against a wall. I was getting panicky, I was obviously terrified, didn't know what was going on. They then asked where my dad was, so they took me along the hallway and opened my dad's door. They took us into the living room.
Keep quiet. Lie down.
Then they gagged us and then bound both our hands and our feet.
The intended target of the robbery was the rent man. He was robbed for just a few £100s. Decades later, Pauline can clearly remember one of the men who subjected her to this terrifying ordeal.
Out of the two, you got a better look at the smaller one.
Yeah.
Just describe him to me.
He had really dark hair. You know, you could see that through the stockings. His eyes were kind of piercing, you know, but I could still really see them.
Have you seen photographs of Angus?
I have, yeah.
And what would you say?
I would say that it was him.
At the time, the police didn't link Sinclair to this crime. They only became aware of his involvement decades later, when a man confessed to being Sinclair's accomplice. He was David Hamilton, Sinclair's brother-in-law.
Angus involved David in a lot of stealing, robberies.
At the time, how much of that were you aware of?
You wouldn't put those two together. David was much younger than Gus, and David just went along with him.
I've learnt that just 1 year before the murder of Francis Barker, Angus Sinclair committed a robbery with an accomplice, his brother-in-law, David. But there's also evidence that when it came to murder, Sinclair didn't act alone. I've returned to the case of the Edinburgh World's End murders of Helen Scott and Christine Eady in October 1977.
Today, he showed no emotion when the guilty verdict was reached.
Angus Sinclair was the only man to be tried and convicted for these murders. And advances in forensics also identified the DNA of a second suspect. It matched to Gordon Hamilton, another brother-in-law of Angus Sinclair.
Tell me about Gordon Hamilton.
Gordon Hamilton is a bit of an enigma. We know that he didn't have any previous convictions. We know that one of his youngest brothers was actually more friendly with Angus Sinclair. But Gordon became more involved with Angus Sinclair in the summer of '77.
first time you became aware of the relationship between Gordon and Angus was when the police were investigating him for the World's End murders, is that right?
Yes.
And were you surprised at that?
Shocked. He'd never been in trouble with the police. He never smoked, he never drank. He used to keep fit, fanatic. I think he got involved in a situation that he couldn't get out of, like my other brother. I think he just used them.
Neither David nor Gordon Hamilton were ever prosecuted for their involvement with Sinclair, and both are now dead. I'm beginning to understand the psychological grip that Angus Sinclair had over both of them. He was not only capable of extreme violence, but could also manipulate others into committing crimes with him. Perhaps even murder.
Angus Sinclair was a very conniving, clever individual who thought that he had the upper hand over the police all the time.
Sinclair had a proven track record of working with accomplices before and during 1977. He robbed with one brother-in-law and may have killed with another. Is it possible Thomas Ross Young was yet another of Sinclair's accomplices? Until now, I've been unable to connect the two men. But buried in the police files, I've uncovered a valuable new lead. A man who claims to have known Angus Sinclair at around the time of the murders.
Hello?
Hello, John, it's Mark Williams Thomas.
Yeah.
I understand that you met Angus Sinclair around 1977. How did that happen?
I was living in a house. There was 6 bedrooms in the house.
I know you only saw him a couple of times. What's your impression of Angus Sinclair?
Just a creepy guy, you know. You told me he was a taxi driver.
John then tells me something highly significant. That the landlord of the property, Billy Welsh, not only knew Angus Sinclair, but also Thomas Ross Young.
He told me he was up at court for Thomas Young.
But Billy definitely knew both Angus Sinclair and Thomas Ross Young.
Yes.
In your reckoning, would that put Angus Sinclair and Thomas Ross Young together around the same time in 1977?
It could have been, you know.
And they were both connected to the address that you were living at?
Yeah, Gatland Street.
John can't be certain of the date, but he's placing Angus Sinclair and Thomas Ross Young together at Kirkland Street, just a few streets away from Francis Barker's house. There's no suggestion that Billy Welsh was involved in or knew anything about the crimes of Sinclair or Young. I can't trace him, but I found his girlfriend at the time.
My name's Mark Williams Thomas, and I was trying to contact your mum. Take care.
Her daughter has agreed to pass on a message.
Hey. Right, so this is the text. So I asked her, can you confirm that Angus Sinclair and Thomas Ross Young knew each other? You know, how? And then she came back and said they knew each other because they both lived with Billy.
What?
But that was before my mum ever got with Billy, so she's not sure the exact time. So she's placing Angus Sinclair, Thomas Ross Young together at Billy's because they both live there.
I can finally put Angus Sinclair and Thomas Ross Young together. It supports my theory that Thomas Ross Young didn't kill Francis Barker alone, and that his accomplice was Angus Sinclair.
This unlocks it all.
40 years ago, Frances Barker was brutally murdered. One man, Thomas Ross Young, was convicted of killing her. Now I'm piecing together evidence he had an accomplice. Angus Sinclair. Today, Sinclair is behind bars. He was finally arrested in 1982, but not for murder.
I spoke to an officer. He explained to me that there was children in Glasgow being sexually assaulted and that they suspected Gus.
How can you do that?
Initially, I didn't believe it. But when he actually admitted it to me, I could have got up and murdered him myself.
You're disgusting! Are you going to tell them the truth? You need to tell them the truth now!
Sinclair was found guilty of multiple child sex offences and sentenced to life in prison.
Do you think that's the scale of it, or do you think there were more?
He said there were more. He couldn't remember the names, he couldn't remember the places, there was that many. His words were, you tell me the names and I'll tell you if I did it.
How many more victims of Angus Sinclair are there? I found out that many years later, whilst in Peterhead prison, Sinclair talked to an informant about his crimes, who fed this information to crime journalist David Leslie.
The only person to whom he has confided his thoughts was my friend, who passed those on to me. Angus Sinclair had been discussing the possible evidence against him, and its subject came round to the question of this car.
Sinclair was worried about a car that he got rid of in 1978 after claiming to have had an accident.
According to Angus Sinclair, there was evidence of somebody having been murdered within that car. He said they will never know how close they came to getting something.
The police traced the vehicle to this quarry, only 1 mile away from the site where Frances Barker's body was found.
The car was driven here, would have sunk, and it lay for over 2 decades.
And as you went through that vehicle, what did you find?
We recovered a child's cagoule, a child's jacket.
And do you know who that belonged to?
We didn't know who it belonged to. We never ever discovered who owned the jacket.
And what else?
We found a pair of makeshift handcuffs fashioned from string, the same string that we'd found had been used on the murder victims.
Quite chilling.
The victims in 1977 were tied up in a similar way. Some with tights or items of their own clothing, and others bound with string.
It's chilling to realise that every moment of Sinclair's life, he was simply a predator. Regardless of where he was, what activity he was taking part in, he was looking for prey.
During this investigation, I've come to understand the sheer scale of missing women and unsolved murders over the past 40 years. I've managed to link some of these victims to 2 of the country's most notorious serial killers, Angus Sinclair and Peter Tobin. Both men were able to kill and remain under the radar for years, preying on innocent young women and even children.
Sadly, I don't believe we'll ever know the true scale of the crimes these men have committed and just how many people they have killed. But what I've managed to do in my investigation is try to find answers for the families who are still searching for justice. What they want now is Peter Tobin and Angus Sinclair to be finally prosecuted for all the crimes they've committed.
Peter Tobin moved freely between Scotland and the south coast before being caught in 2006. My investigation has linked him to two unsolved cases. The murder of Jessie Earle, whose remains were found in 1989.
You wake up in the morning and you think Jessie. Difficult to put into a word, isn't it? It's an offence to Jessie to have on a death certificate cause of death unknown. It was blindingly obvious what it was.
And the disappearance of 18-year-old Louise Kay in 1988.
If it is Peter Tobin, I know he's in prison and I don't care about him. I just want to know where she is. If there were remains found, that we can bury her. I don't want Louise to be forgotten about.
Tobin hid or buried his victims, and I've identified a property in Brighton that hasn't been searched by the police, which could hold the key to what happened to Louise.
Louise Kay goes missing June 1988, and we can now place Peter Tobin at Windlesham Road address at that period of time.
I've informed Sussex Police of my investigation, and they say they fully investigated both cases and would review them should any new evidence come to light. At this point, they have declined my invitation to search Windlesham Road.
I am sad that I had to become involved in the Peter Tobin investigation, having to deal with the horrors of it. I would like to have found out what else he's done, and that's something I feel strongly about. And I still say that people in the public do know other things about Tobin. Years go on, but I always say the passage of time should not be detrimental to the detection of crime.
My investigation into Angus Sinclair shows he could be one of the country's most prolific serial killers. I've established a new link between Sinclair and Thomas Ross Young, which I believe implicates him in the killing of Francis Barker, as well as the unsolved Glasgow 3 murders.
The evidence against Angus Sinclair is overwhelming. I can connect him to the murder of Hilda McAuley. I can place his vehicle at the murder site of Anna Kenny and Agnes Cooney. And I can connect him through the uniqueness of all 6 murders in the manner in which they were killed and their bodies left.
Sinclair has never talked about his involvement in any of these crimes.
Take a good look at these pictures, Mr. Sinclair. These are the pictures of the 2 girls that we've spoken about.
And until now, he has only been charged with the World's End murders.
Did you kill these lasses? I think you're sitting there, dying to tell us what happened that night. Tell us if you were involved in their killing.
The Crown took the view that there was insufficient evidence at that time in the Glasgow cases, and it was a devastating blow for all of us who wanted to see Angus Sinclair identified for all the murders he committed.
Police Scotland say the murders of Anna Kenny, Agnes Cooney, Hilda McAuley and Eddie Cotogno were all fully investigated, and the Crown decided there was insufficient evidence to prosecute Angus Sinclair. The cases remain open, and Police Scotland say they will review any new evidence that comes to light as a result of this investigation. Now in their 70s and suffering ill health, time is running out to stop these 2 men taking their secrets to the grave.
How important is it for the families to see justice being done in relation to Angus Sinclair?
The family of Francis Barker, the families of all the other unsolved murder victims have a right to know who was responsible. This man is a mass murderer, make no mistake about it.
to be found the way she was found was horrific. It was a brutal murder. It devastated the whole family.
Those girls need justice. It must happen. It must, before it goes back to the devil who spawned them.